الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء، واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم، ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد، فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله، وأحسن الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، وشر الأمور محدثاتها، وكل محدثة بدعة، وكل بدعة ضلالة، وكل ضلالة في النار. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Firstly, I would like to remind myself and my brothers and sisters about the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The taqwa of Allah that we hear every khutbah and from the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam is that every admonishment, every khutbah, every sermon, he will remind the people of the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we hear, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ittaqullah haqqa tuqatih. O you who believe, have the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as he is deserving. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, Ya ayyuhan nasu ittaqu rabbakum. O mankind, have taqwa of your Lord. And he says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ittaqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida. O you who believe, have the taqwa of Allah and say that which is correct and upright. The taqwa of Allah is fulfilling the commandments of Allah and staying away from the prohibitions of Allah. And with the taqwa of Allah will be the entrance into Jannah. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says about the Jannah, u'iddat lil muttaqin, that it has been prepared for the people of taqwa. فَيَا عِبَادَ اللَّهِ اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ حَيْثُمَا كُنْتُ وَأَتْبِعِ السَّيِّئَةَ الْحَسَنَةَ تَمْحُهَا. So, O servants of Allah, have taqwa of Allah wherever you are, and follow up the bad deed with a good deed so that it may erase it. أما موضوع هذه الخطبة الخاص، فنستمر على ما بدأنا به من القيام بالأمانات والمسؤوليات التي نسأل عنها يوم القيامة. As for the main topic of this khutbah, we continue insha'Allah ta'ala in that which we began, speaking about the trust and responsibilities and obligations that will be asked about on the day of judgment. وفي الخطبة الماضية تكلمنا عن أمانة العلم والحذر من أخذ العلم عن غير أهله والكلام في دين الله بغير علم. In our last khutbah, we spoke about the trust concerning knowledge and warning about taking knowledge from other than its people and those deserving of knowledge being taken from them, and warning about speaking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and concerning the religion of Allah, that which we have no knowledge about. And in today's khutbah, أريد أن أتكلم وأذكر نفسي وإخواني وأخواتي أن أحد أعظم الأمانات التي حملنا الله إياها ألا وهي أمانة القيام بتربية الأولاد ورعايتهم. As for today, I would like to remind myself and my brothers and sisters about one of the greatest trusts and responsibility that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed on our shoulders, and that is the trust and the responsibility of nurturing our children and looking after the children. قال صلى الله عليه وسلم كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. ثم قال والرجل راع على أهل بيته وهو مسؤول عنهم والمرأة راعية على بيت بعلها وولده وهي مسؤولة عنهم. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said that you all are shepherds and you all are going to be asked concerning his flock. You are all responsible for something, and you are all going to be asked concerning your responsibility. And then he said, and the man, he is a shepherd over his family, over the members of his home, and he will be asked concerning them. And the woman, she is a shepherd, she is responsible for the home of her husband and his children, and she will be asked concerning them. In this hadith, we see that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned from the responsibility of the believers, both men and women are the children. As in this hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he make it clear that both the man and the woman, they are both responsible for those in the home. And it is not, as many people they think, that it is only upon the woman and not the husband, or the opposite, only upon the man and not the woman. نعم الرجل والمرأة كلاهما مسؤولان عن الأولاد كما بينه الحديث، كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم الرجل مسؤول عن أهل بيته، وقال والمرأة مسؤولة عن بيت بعلها وولده، فكلاهما مسؤولان عن الأولاد وعن أفراد البيت كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم وبينه في هذا الحديث. وأولى المسؤوليات على الأولاد التربية الدينية، وقال صلى الله عليه وسلم مروا أولادكم بالصلاة وهم أبناء 7 واضربوهم عليها ب10 وفرقوا بينهم في المضاجع. And the first responsibility that we have concerning our children is their religious upbringing, to nurture them upon this deen. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, command your children with salah when they are 7 years old, and beat them upon it if they refuse to pray when they are 10 years, and separate their beds when they are 10 years, meaning between the male and between the female. وقال تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا وقودها الناس والحجارة عليها ملائكة غلاظ شداد لا يعصون الله ما أمرهم ويفعلون ما يؤمرون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, addressing the people of Iman, O you who believe, save yourself and your family from a fire whose fuel is men and stone. In charge over it are angels who are strict and stern, and they do not disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala concerning that which they are commanded. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentioned in this verse that after saving ourselves and working on ourselves, the very next responsibility we have is our own family. They take priority over everyone else besides them. Saving yourself and then saving your family. Saving them from what? Saving them from the fire of hell. That is your first responsibility you have concerning your family. The first responsibility you have concerning your children is to save them from the fire of hell, not to save them from poverty, not to save them from unemployment, not to save them from not having a shahada, a certificate or anything of this dunya, rather to save them from the fire of hell. And you are going to be asked concerning that. And as the scholars, they say that whosoever man shagalahu al-mustahab anil wajib fahuwa maghrur, that whosoever he is being busy with that which is recommended over that which is obligatory, he is someone who is being deceived. We see many people, they leave their children and they leave their home for things they think is better. They rather look after their neighbors instead of their children. They rather serve the masjid instead of looking after their children. They rather do good all around instead of looking after their children. Whosoever is busy with that which is recommended over that which is wajib, over that which is obligatory, he is being deceived. So what about those who are busy with that which is not even recommended, something that is generally permissible over the obligation? Then he is upon clear misguidance. Those who busy themselves with earning of this dunya, many women, unfortunately, they leave their children in order to work for extra earnings of this dunya that they are not in need of. And they leave their children alone. And many of them, they want to go here and there and everywhere. And they leave their children in the hands of those who will destroy their deen and even their dunya. Those individuals, they are clearly upon misguidance and not upon the guidance of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. وقد بينا من أهمية الرعاية والقيام بمسؤولية تجاه الأبناء في الخطبة الماضية، ونزيد على ذلك قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم: ما من عبد استرعاه الله رعية يموت يوم يموت وهو غاش لرعيته إلا حرمه الله عليه الجنة. وفي لفظ: فلم يحطها بنصيحة إلا لم يجد رائحة الجنة. And we continue after mentioning what we mentioned concerning the importance of fulfilling our trust and responsibility towards our children. The statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said that there is no servant that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed him in charge and responsible over a group, and then he died the day he died, and he is cheating concerning his responsibility. And cheating concerning his responsibility, as the scholars they mention, it means that he does not fulfill his responsibility, and he does not strive in fulfilling his responsibility and making effort in fulfilling his responsibility. No one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed a responsibility on his shoulder over a group of people, and then they die and they do not fulfill that responsibility. They cheat concerning that responsibility, except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make haram upon them the Jannah. Yes, my brothers and sisters, this is not something that is light. This is not something to take lightly. You leave your children anyhow without striving, and you do not care about them. How many people we see, the most they are concerned about their children is only this worldly life. And they care less about the hereafter of their children. Rather, how many will become very angry upon their children if they do not fulfill something of their personal desires. But if their children was to not pray, or if their children was to commit a sin, it is something light upon them. Not fulfilling their obligation upon their children in calling them towards the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. not fulfilling the obligation of their children in giving them their rights that is due upon the parents. Yes, the children, they have rights, and they may have more rights than the parents have over them. The rights of the parents are more severe, but the rights of the children are many. And many parents, they neglect the rights of their children until they become big, until they become mature and older. And then they expect that their children give them their rights. It is not going to happen like that except by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And fulfilling their obligation towards their children is not just any obligation, rather misleading that obligation and misleading that trust, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned, is a reason to be prevented from the Jannah. And in another hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that whosoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he placed a trust over them, meaning and he put them in charge of a group of people, and then they die, and they have not covered that responsibility with nasiha, with advice, and wanting good for those they are responsible for, they will never smell the fragrance of Jannah, meaning they will be prevented from the entering of the Jannah. So my dear brothers and sisters, let's take this responsibility that we have over our children serious, and know that this responsibility is start before the birth. It starts before the child is born. And perhaps in another khutbah, insha'Allah ta'ala, we will speak of the many rights that the children and the child, they have over their parents. And know that those responsibilities, yes, it starts before they're born. It starts in you choosing a spouse for a proper mother and a proper father for your child. It starts by you training yourself before you even give birth and before you even have a child, so that you are an example for your children. And it starts from the time they are born, and you nourishing them upon the obedience of Allah and not exposing them to the disobedience of Allah to the best of your ability. And the rights of the children, it begins from then until you return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So do not take this responsibility lightly, and do not waste those who are under your responsibility. And if you make your effort and you fulfill this responsibility, then know that you are free in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لَيْسَ عَلَيْكَ هُدَاهُمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَن يَشَاءُ. It is not for you to force guidance upon them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the one who guides. But once you call them and you do your part, then there will be no blame upon you. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us steadfast and keep our children steadfast and aid us in fulfilling our responsibilities and our amana that we have in this dunya. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the good of this world and the good of the hereafter, and to protect us from the fire of hell. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us steadfast in this dunya, and to aid us on all of the believing men and women around the world, to aid us upon His guidance, and to aid us against the oppressors and the disbelievers who want evil for this deen and evil for the Muslims. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give all of the oppressed Muslim men and women victory over those who are oppressing them. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa sallam wa aqimus salah.